Your grandfather had a food system you were never taught. Not a secret. Something so ordinary to him that he never thought to write it down. Every American farm with a low corner and standing water ran it, without a name, without instructions, without a single dollar spent on inputs. A system so productive that scientists would struggle to match it a century later. It required no fertilizer, no irrigation, no annual planting, no purchased feed. A hole in the ground, some water, the right plants, a few ducks, some fish, and a family that produced a third of its protein year-round without depending on anyone. Then scientists finally measured what that hole in the ground was actually doing. They found that a properly managed shallow water system produces food value at 45 to 160 times the output of equivalent farmland per acre, not per input dollar. The most productive food system on this continent was not the cornfield. It never was. It was the low, cattail ringed margin that every modern farmer drains and fills in order to plant the cornfield. And when the grocery store arrived and the farm pond got filled in, 3 generations of Americans quietly forgot what self-sufficiency actually looked like. In 10 years, that will matter in ways most people are not prepared for. Welcome to Nature's Lost Vault. The archive opens in Newport, Rhode Island, June 1767. A man named Samuel Drown is writing a letter describing a property called Malbone Hall. He lists what any serious farm must have, the way you would list a barn or a root cellar. He writes it without ceremony. You will certainly dig a fish pond, and another for geese and ducks, and 1 swan. Not a luxury. A baseline, a given for any family intending to feed itself. Prior to the mid-19th century, English farming manuals carried across the Atlantic instructed colonists in the strategies for keeping and rearing fish in enclosed ponds. By the end of the 18th century, private fish ponds had become a vital component of American mixed farming. This was working infrastructure. You built a pond the same way you dug a well, because winter came every year, and the nearest store was a day's ride away. What the farmstead builder understood, without ever using the word ecology, was that water managed correctly does not just hold nutrients. It cycles them. It turns them into forms that feed the next layer, then the next. Nothing wasted. Everything eaten. The whole engine running on sunlight and rain. The plants were the gears of that engine. And the first one at the edge of the water was a plant this channel has already opened a vault on. Cattail. Typha latifolia. Called the supermarket of the swamp by forager Ewell Gibbons, and confirmed by research at Syracuse University. Researchers documented yields of 140 tons of rhizomes per acre per year. When processed into flour, that exceeds the starch yield of potatoes, yams, rice, or corn. Every part is edible across every season. Young shoots in spring taste like asparagus. Summer pollen replaces flour in any bread recipe. Fall and winter roots yield a starch so abundant that a single stand could carry a family's carbohydrate needs through the coldest months. But the cattail does not just feed you. It keeps the system alive. Its roots pull excess nitrogen and phosphorus from the water, preventing the algae blooms that would choke everything else. A pond without cattail at its margins is a pond slowly dying. A pond with it cleans itself. At the surface, spreading like a living green mat, sat something your ancestors called pond scum, not knowing they were looking at one of the most protein-dense plants on Earth. We covered it in episode 38. Duckweed is the smallest flowering plant in existence, producing up to 45% protein by dry weight, with an amino acid profile comparable to traditional legumes. It does this by doubling its mass every 48 hours. 1 square meter of pond surface covered in duckweed produces more protein per year than the same area planted in soybeans. The family keeping ducks did not think of this as a crop. They thought of it as what the ducks ate. What was actually running was a protein conversion system so efficient that modern food scientists are now trying to industrialize it at scale, centuries after America already ran it for free. The third plant at the waterline had a name, one Lewis and Clark gave to an entire island. November 1805, the Columbia River. The expedition has been traveling for 18 months and is close to starving. A group of Chinookan women are working in water up to their chests in the November cold, doing something Clark has never seen. They are not using tools. They are loosening the mud with their feet, feeling for round tubers buried in the silt, watching them float to the surface one by one. They fill their canoes without speaking. They have done this every October for their entire lives, and their mothers did it before them, and their grandmothers before that. Clark writes in his journal that the root resembled a small Irish potato. When roasted in the embers, it had an agreeable taste and served well as bread. The captains named what is now Sauvie Island off the Oregon coast Wapato Island, after the plant that saved their expedition that winter. This is Wapato, Sagittaria latifolia, the duck potato. A single hectare of Wapato wetland produces up to 6 metric tons of tubers per year. The harvest window runs 200 days, October through May, precisely when every other crop is dormant and every pantry is running low. It grows in the exact places no farmer wanted for anything else: the waterlogged margins, the flooded corners, the ground that cannot be plowed. Those places were not wasted. They were the most productive ground on the property. And then the ducks made everything else possible. Waterfowl and aquatic plants co-evolved over millions of years. The relationship is not accidental. Waterfowl grubbing breaks up the rhizomes of aquatic plants like Wapato, releasing fragments that float to new locations and take root. They carry seeds on their feet. They deposit the richest nitrogen input the pond receives. Duck droppings fertilize the water so completely that a flock saves every dollar that would otherwise go to supplemental fish feed, which accounts for 60% of the total cost in conventional fish culture. They stir bottom sediment when they dabble, releasing locked nutrients back into the water column. They aerate the surface as they swim. A small flock of 6 ducks performs all of this labor automatically, every day, and repays you with up to 340 eggs per bird per year. A farmstead woman in 1830 keeping Rouen or Cayuga ducks around a half-acre pond was collecting 2,000 eggs annually from birds that fed themselves almost entirely from the water. Beneath the surface, the fish closed the loop. The farm pond fish of 19th century America were not exotic, managed stock. They were bluegill, catfish, perch, and bass. Native species that asked for nothing except clean water and insects. The ducks provided both. Duck droppings feed algae. Algae feed zooplankton. Zooplankton feed small fish. Small fish feed larger fish. Fish waste feeds the bacteria that feed the plants that filter the water the fish live in. A well-managed half-acre pond produced hundreds of pounds of protein per year without a single purchased pellet of feed. This is what Samuel Drown assumed every serious property would have. The people who built these ponds did not think of them as agriculture. They thought of them the way you think of a well. You need water, you dig a well. You need protein through winter, you dig a pond. Then the 20th century inverted the logic entirely. The refrigerator rail car arrived in the 1880s. By 1920, the United States Department of Agriculture Extension Service was teaching American farmers to specialize. Plant corn, raise hogs, sell what you grow, buy what you do not. The integrated pond was declared inefficient by the same logic that called the sunchoke primitive, and the tepary bean backward. It produced too many different things. Nothing could be harvested by machine, standardized for shipping, or stored in a warehouse. The ducks wandered. The Wapato grew where it wanted. The cattail spread past its planting. The whole system demanded attention and knowledge rather than capital and machinery. In an economy being rebuilt around inputs you purchased, a food system that ran on inputs you managed for free had no place. What happened next took less than a single generation. A father dug a pond and managed it. His son was told to specialize and let it go. His grandson was born into a world where the pond had been filled, the knowledge had never been written down, and the grocery store was the only food system anyone could remember. By 1950, most American farm ponds had been drained or converted into decorative features. The fish that once fed families became something to watch, not to eat. The knowledge did not get written down because it did not need to be. Then the generation that carried it died, and it went with them. But the plants never left. Every low, marshy corner and flooded pasture edge is an unmanaged version of what a working farm pond used to be. Wapato still grows along the Columbia. Duckweed still doubles every 48 hours on any standing water in sunlight. Cattail still produces tons of flour per acre. Bluegills still spawn in every shallow margin that was not paved. The system did not fail. It was abandoned. And abandonment can be reversed. Start with the water. If you have a low corner on your land that holds standing water seasonally, you have the foundation. Deepen the center to at least 5 feet and leave a shallow shelf at the margin, 1 foot deep and 2 to 3 feet wide. Everything begins at that shelf. Plant cattail along the shallow edge and let it spread. It is filtering your water and building your flower supply simultaneously. Plant purslane, which we covered in episode 29, along the damp bank above the waterline. It asks for nothing and delivers the most omega-3 dense green you can grow. Float duckweed on the surface in late spring, leaving open water for light penetration. The ducks will regulate the coverage themselves, eating it down each morning and watching it double back by afternoon. You manage nothing. The biology manages it. Push Wapato tubers into the mud where the shelf meets deeper water. 1 planting. In 2 years you will have a stand that harvests from October through May, exactly the months the rest of your garden has gone quiet. The Chinookan women who fed Lewis and Clark through that first Columbia winter had been planting it this way for generations. The method has not changed because it does not need to. Add your ducks in the 2nd month. 3 to 6 birds for a small pond. Ruan or cayuga for eggs that run nearly year-round. Within weeks the water will visibly change as nutrients cycle. Then it will clear. The system is finding its balance without your help. Stock your fish in the 3rd month. 50 bluegill fingerlings per 1,000 square feet. Do not supplement feed. The ducks have already fertilized the water. The plants have already filtered it. The insects and zooplankton have already stocked the larder. Your fish are joining a system that was running before they arrived. By the end of year 1, duck eggs are coming in. By year 2, the Wapato harvest starts. By year 3, you are pulling fish from water that your great-grandmother would have recognized without needing an explanation. A food system that runs itself. That does not wait for a delivery truck. That cannot be rationed, priced out from under you, or disrupted by a supply chain on the other side of the country. Your grandfather did not call it self-sufficiency. He did not call it permaculture or regenerative food systems or any of the names we use now. He called it the pond out back. He knew what was in it. He knew what it cost to maintain. Nothing. And he knew what it cost to lose it. Everything. Every flooded corner treated as a drainage problem is this system: waiting. The gap between what that ground is doing right now and what it could be doing is nothing more than intention and a handful of ducks. Dig the pond, plant the edge, float the ducks. Let the water do what water has always done when you give it the right company. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to forget. The next vault opens soon.